Israel's war against Hamas continues to garner reaction here at home as federal officials call for aid. Hear from the organization looking to provide aid to Palestinian refugees. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. Overseas, Israel's war on the militant group Hamas nears 1 month now. This as the federal government looks to increase humanitarian support to civilians in the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip. Israel has agreed to daily pauses in the bombardment in order to allow a more humanitarian aid to reach the area. So far in the conflict, over 10,000 people have been killed after Israel declared war in response to the attack that saw Hamas kill over 1,000 people and take over 200 Israeli hostages. Now, the daily pauses are a step closer to the ongoing calls for pro-Palestinian advocates for a full ceasefire in the region. While some aid has gotten to the area, supporters here in the state say more needs to be done.
I would like everyone to please call their Congress and demand for ceasefire and an end to occupation.
Joining us now to give additional insight on the situation faced by the Palestinian refugees, Mara Cronenfeld. She's the Executive Director for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency USA Chapter. Mara, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
For those who may not know about your organization, what is it you do? Explain what you do.
Yes, so the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees serves the essential humanitarian needs of those refugeed after 1948 and those displaced from their homes, those individuals, about 700,000 and their descendants, who are in refugee settings across 5 different areas. Gaza, of course, as we've been hearing about in the news, East Jerusalem and the West Bank, and then Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon.
What are you hearing from Gaza right now? Is it as bad as it seems to be with what's happening there in terms of the retaliation coming in from Israel? It seems like you can't really separate, forgive the good guys from the bad guys. It seems like everybody's getting pounded here, whether you are involved in this or not.
Yeah, it's absolute living, and in many cases, not living hellscape. We have over 10,000, roughly 10,800 individuals who've been killed. Roughly 70% of those are women and children. We have over 4,400 children killed in the last some 30 days. I have been to Gaza myself. I have met so many young people who had such futures in front of them, and I can't tell you right now if those young people are alive or if they've been killed. We have a situation where potable water is running out. UNRWA had remarked that the fuel was about to run out about 3 weeks ago in the hopes that the humanitarian community would come together, that the countries engaged in trying to find some sort of humanitarian access would help us get fuel into the strip so that desalination plants could work. And they started to ration that water about 3 weeks ago, and now we are at the very last drips. Fuel is essential for clean water. It's essential for hospitals to function. Right now, only 1 in 2 hospitals is working in the strip. 2/3 of health centers are shut down. We know we've seen hospitals that have been bombed, that have been damaged. We need fuel for those hospitals to operate. We've seen catastrophe in front of our eyes. This is only going to get worse if fuel isn't let in. This is an absolute must for food, for bakeries, for clean water, for hospitals to function. And frankly, UNRWA, the UN agency, is the one UN agency that has the widest operational presence in Gaza. So UNRWA is the agency that's actually taking whatever goods get across the border, and there's been about 700 trucks so far. They're the ones taking them from Rafah, from the border, and getting them to those in need. Without fuel, how can these trucks, how can these vans, how can these cars transport those goods?
Yeah, well, I want to address that issue as well, because is it naive for someone here in the West to say, well, if you're not part of Hamas and you're not the ones attacking Israel, you should just get out of there and leave, go somewhere else? But are the borders not open to them, like in Egypt, to just leave? And there's also an issue of just physically moving and getting out of there. Do they even have an option to leave if they wanted to?
No, I think that's such an important point for all those listening to understand that there are just a couple of folks, I don't know the number, who are dual nationals that are getting through Rafah. And this is after, imagine, some 3 or 4 weeks of negotiations. This is a population of 2.2 million people, one of the most population dense areas in the world, and there is nowhere that they can go. The forced displacement already of 1.5 million people, it was already a highly dense setting. Now we're talking about 1.5 million people being moved south of Wadi Gaza. We have some of the shelters, and these aren't installations that were built to be shelters. These are schools having 20,000 people in them. The average, there's 160 people who access one bathroom on average. Imagine standing in line with 160 people just to use the restroom. These are inhumane conditions. And UNRWA is doing the very best they can under terrible conditions. Ahead of this bombardment, this besiegement of Gaza, the Gaza, all of the borders, whether land, sea, and air, have been under a 16-year blockade. And so Israel has controlled these borders. Even at that time, it was very, very, very difficult. I can tell you from personal experience and knowing many families there, to get out and in to Gaza, let alone goods, medicines, and other things that were needed at the time and that continue to be needed.
We heard late in the week about a ceasefire for like 4 hours a day, where aid can get in and out. Is that helping at all, or is that not enough of a window to really make a difference?
We need full-throated, we need a real ceasefire. We need to stop the killing. There have been far too many civilians who have been killed. This is collective punishment on a vastly civilian population. We can tell by the 68% women and children and that doesn't even count so many men who are civilians who are doing the best to save their families. The number one message I have for viewers and for all those in the United States is to advocate for a ceasefire. The killing has to stop. And the other thing is the humanitarian access that's going in right now is a drop of aid in an ocean of need. It is so small in terms of the need. And without fuel, this aid can't even be distributed across the Strip.
Last question, and we only got about a minute or so. For those who look at the whole situation from afar and say, as awful as what you're describing is, they should be angry with Hamas, not Israel, because Israel is defending itself. What's your reaction to that? And are we past trying to play the blame game? These are just people suffering and they need help.
These are people suffering and they need help. I have been in Gaza myself. I never met anybody from Hamas. I have met families. I have met people whose kids are at Harvard, who got out and are at Harvard and Stanford and are curing cancer. And one gentleman, our friend, put the first helicopter on the moon with working with NASA. This population has been dehumanized so dangerously that we're watching a catastrophe take place in front of our eyes, and we're not trusting our human instincts, which should be and should continue to be stop the killing, ceasefire.
All right, Mara Cronenfeld from the UNRWA USA, thank you for coming on today. It's certainly a complicated and serious issue. We appreciate you shedding some light on it for us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Helping kids and teens navigate the mental health impacts of social media. That's the goal of some new proposed legislation. Hear from an expert on problematic media use during childhood, on the impact social media can have, and how this law might help. If you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. Also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. State leaders taking steps now trying to curb the mental health impacts of social media on kids and teenagers. The Stop Addictive Feeds Exploitation Act would change how youths interact with social media. This bill would ban social media platforms from offering what they call addictive feeds to minors without parental consent, and block the platforms from sending notifications to minors during the night, among other restrictions. To give us a better idea of how social media can impact children, teenagers, and the steps we can all take to protect them, we're joined by Dr. Sarah Domoff, an assistant professor at the Department of Psychology at SUNY Albany. Sarah, thanks so much for coming on. Such an important topic.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I was thinking, preparing for this, when I was a kid, parents got criticized that they put you in front of the TV for a couple of hours watching reruns of Gilligan's Island. This is not that. Social media is a totally different animal, isn't it, in terms of the interaction with the kids and the effect?
Exactly. So social media is interactive, it's dynamic. There are so many differences between social media or media today and what it was like even just 15, 20 years ago. So the content matters, of course, but there's also the interaction piece, who we interact with, feedback we get about ourselves when we're on social media that can really play a role in terms of adolescents' mental health.
Yeah, I want to hit on two of those things. One could be the reaction to something you post, or do you become addictive to looking for comments and likes? Talk about that piece of it, because some people's whole day can swing one way or the other depending on how many little hearts they get next to something they put up on there.
Yeah, so the research shows that it's complicated. So social media use can lead to maybe us feeling better about things or our well-being when we see content that's positive. But we also see that the opposite is true. So experiences of cyberbullying, people trolling, harassment online, or just frankly rude comments can contribute to what we call ill-being or feelings of distress. So we have both an opportunity for positive experiences online and negative experiences. And for an adolescent, it's really important because they're growing, they're developing. Social connection with others is so important. Naturally, they're drawn to using social media, and there can be some negative effects.
There really is a window into your life, isn't there? I mean, in terms of angry people who want to jump on a thread and post something they know is provocative just to upset people, and they get their jollies, for lack of a better word, watching people start to get upset. And you've got to really shut the door on that stuff, don't you? And it's hard if you're a 14-year-old person, you know?
Exactly. So some of the research that I do at Albany and that others are doing around the country really ties into how do we help teens develop better relationships with social media and technology? How do we help them steer towards positive content or interactions with people they know in real life and face-to-face interactions that are positive for them? So part of it is like helping teens develop skills and how to use social media in ways that could potentially benefit them. But then importantly, kind of coinciding with some of the legislation that's coming out in New York and other states, it's important for tech companies to also be aware that this is having a huge impact on youth, and it's hard for parents and teens to completely create a social media experience where there aren't these negative influences. And sometimes teens get promoted content that can be really problematic for them. And especially if they have mental health vulnerabilities, we see greater concerns.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit. In terms of, a parent could yell at a teenager, say, every time I look, I see the top of your head, you're in that phone. Put the phone down. What the parent might not understand, and you could speak to this, is, and we're seeing this with lawsuits now, there's an addictive quality it's not accidental, it's deliberate in the algorithms to pull them into this world and keep them there for as long as possible, correct?
Exactly. And so part of the challenge, and it's true for us adults as well, that the content that we see, especially that teens see, it really play on, what keeps them engaged. So eyes on the screen contributes to more of a profit, more money. And in the end of the day, these are businesses. And so we need to be aware of the factors that are at play and really hold companies accountable for profiting off of children and teens through these algorithms. There are certain vulnerable groups, individuals who may have mental health concerns, that are push content that can reinforce some beliefs or behaviors, attitudes that can be harmful for them. And so we see that, for example, with content that promotes eating disorders or self-harm, suicidality, and just in general content that reinforces messages about ourselves that are not conducive to well-being. And so, we have a job as adults raising children, as teens themselves have, responsibilities as it relates to choosing content that can be appropriate for them. But on the other side, we also know that there are algorithms that push this content. So it's not entirely 100% within our control.
Yeah, I want to drill down on that a little bit with teenage girls, especially, or the tweens. If you look at the stuff that gets pushed out on TikTok, for example, the body dysmorphia of like, oh, look at these girls. I'm not this pretty. I'm not this skinny. I'm not this whatever. Does that affect them mentally, that making them feel worse about themselves in terms of looking at this stuff all day? And also the mean girls aspect of it. If you do put something up, people are sniping at you and criticizing. It almost makes you understand why somebody wants to Photoshop themselves, because they don't want to take the criticism.
Exactly. So what we see with digital media and social media is the content that you consume or look at really shapes your beliefs about what is idealized in our society. And so we have this thin ideal internalization, where what we see is reinforced to us as the standard of beauty, or that which is reinforced by people, maybe through more likes and shares and so forth. With the links between social media use and mental health concerns, especially body image concerns and disordered eating, it's really when we look at content or post content of ourselves where we use filters or shape, touch up how we look and share that content, that drives some of these associations with poor body image and disordered eating risk. And so, of course, the content matters, that what we see, but because it's interactive, it's also about how we ourselves are engaging with this content, sharing the content or posting the content of idealized bodies.
We've only got a minute or so left. I know we talk about the AGs joining others. They're suing Meta for some of this addictive qualities. We have the governor trying to pass bills. What ultimately is the solution here? To get the phone out of the teens' hands, sometimes limit maybe how much exposure? Would that help?
So some of the big areas that should be targeted include exposure to some content. So if the legislation comes out and companies are held to not use these algorithms to push content that can be super reinforcing or harmful to teens, that's one aspect. But also it's helping teens choose content that may be more beneficial for them. We do actually see positive effects when the content is pro-social or engaging or fostering social connectedness. On the other hand, we also really care about the timing of use. And so if we can limit access to social media or smartphones before bedtime and keep it out of the bedrooms, that is always something that we recommend, because it's not just the content, it's the timing. And sleep is so important for teens, for everyone. Anything that can disrupt it is something that we should try to address.
Well, Dr. Sarah Domoff, I wish we had an hour to talk about this, but we have to wrap it up. Thank you for coming on and hopefully sharing some insight that could help parents and teenagers out as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, elections have come and gone, leaving many looking ahead to the high-profile elections of next year. When we come back, we're going to break down on what the voting process looked like this time around and how it actually might impact those federal elections in 2024. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. Voters headed to the polls this past week to elect a number of local leadership roles and positions. Now eyes are turning to 2024 when elections for statewide and federal elections happen. Jamie DeLine taking a look at the likely trends for the upcoming election.
It may be a year away, but already people are turning their sights towards the big races of 2024.
Next year will be a very busy year for elections in New York State. We actually will have 3 between the presidential primary in April, the state and local primary in June, and then the general election next November.
A recent New York Times and Siena College poll found that if Joe Biden and Donald Trump go head-to-head once again with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. running as an independent, it would be a very close presidential race.
We took a look at 6 battleground states, all of which were won by President Joe Biden in the 2020 election. And at this point in time, what we found is that 5 out of the 6 states would go for former President Trump over Biden. Biden is only leading by a scant 2.5 points in Wisconsin.
59% of voters say Trump would do a better job with the economy than Biden, When it comes to abortion, 49% think Biden would do a better job. But the issue of democracy has voters almost split, 48 to 45, with 3% more siding with Biden. While presidential election years typically get more voter turnout, casting ballots in local races are important too.
Local elections are one of the most important elections to vote in. These are the elections that really have the greatest impact on your day-to-day life.
Kathleen McGrath, Director of Public Information for the New York State Board of Elections, shares this year's unofficial early voting numbers.
For the 9 days of early voting, almost 400,000 New Yorkers came and early voted during those 9 days.
Reporting in Albany, I'm Jamie DeLine.
Stick around. We'll be back with a look at the week ahead in just a moment. If you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also find us and reach out on X, what we used to call Twitter. We're at WTEN. Finally, on Empire State Weekly, state leaders giving an update on the ongoing effort to reduce crime. According to data from the Division of Criminal Justice Services, violent crimes have dropped in the first half of this year compared to last year. Despite the decrease, though, voters believe that crime has gotten worse in the last year. That's according to a recent Siena College poll. Next week, we'll be looking to speak with a community advocate working to reduce gun violence and why they think people don't feel safe in their communities. For now, from all of us here on Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray in Albany. We'll see you right here next week. Quick reminder, don't forget you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York. Here's a full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 television stations across the great state of New York.